Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. Before we begin, can I request everyone to switch off their phones or keep it on silent? Um, yeah. Thank you and welcome to Times Delhi LitFest. This is presented by Rajni in partnership with Madhav Rachna University and TUI. Today we have a panel discussion on how will India deal with President Trump. This has been powered by Carnegie and Brookings. On our panel we have Rajiv Malhotra ji, we have Mr. C. Rajamohan, Dhruva Jaishankar and Arun Singh. We will be doing Q&A at a 30-minute mark, and I'll be letting the panelists know when 30 minutes are up, and yeah, the session ends at 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the organizers. My name is Dhruva Jaishankar. I'm a fellow at Brookings India, which is a think tank here in New Delhi. We're here to discuss the United States under Donald Trump and the implications for India and US-India relations. We have a very distinguished panel here. They were introduced briefly. I will introduce them in some more detail shortly. But the point of this is actually to have as much of an interactive session as possible. So I'm going to start off by asking all our panelists a simple question to just get us started, hear their views on different aspects of what Donald Trump's election means for the US, for India, for bilateral relations. And then we can go on to a more interactive discussion that I will moderate. Let me start off to my immediate right. Now, this has been, of course, this requires no further detail, but this has been really one of the biggest surprises, the biggest shocks in American politics in 70 years at least. And many of, I think the one, whatever your views may be on Donald Trump, I think there's general consensus that there's a lot of uncertainty now about the United States and its role in the world. Much of that uncertainty will be addressed in the coming days and weeks. But to my immediate right, we have C. Rajamohan, who is the head of Carnegie India, a good friend and occasional collaborator. He's an author of several books, including Modi's World and Samudra Manthan. He's perhaps India's most respected strategic expert. He did spend a lot of time in the United States in Washington as a correspondent for The Hindu. You now are probably familiar with his writings regularly in the Indian Express. And so I'll turn to Dr. Rajamohan and say, what is going to be the impact for the United States as a nation and for its role in the world with this election?
I think before we get a sense of what Trump means for India, I think it's important to see what he's doing to the United States. I think part of the problem in dealing with the United States is the campaign is nearly 2 years. It takes 2 years. The whole world thinks it has a stake in the election, of course, because US is so powerful. What it does, where it goes, affects everyone in the world, because US is the #1 economy, the most powerful military power. So all this makes the US election of significance and importance to everyone in the world. But often I think that leads to a mistake, which is to believe we have a vote in the American election. We don't have a vote in the US election. Those of us who live in India, who are Indian citizens, we don't have a vote in the US election. So we got to assess America on its own terms. Apne meter pe chalte, whatever the phrase in Hindi is, that it has its own political rhythm, it has its own political dynamic, and I think America is a very intensely political animal. So therefore we got to understand why Mr. Trump has won. He's not merely saying he's X, he's Y, just because the liberal media and the West has told us this guy is unelectable, he won't be elected, therefore everybody's in a shock. So I think what Mr. Trump has done, I think he's done, he's challenged the very core assumptions of America's international engagement in 3 directions. One, he's mobilized the anti-globalization sentiment in the United States. All these years, since 91 at least, the argument in India is Americans are pushing us into globalization, we must resist it, we must be careful, we must not accept American pressure. But this election has seen a large section of the American population saying globalization is bad for them. In fact, one of the slogans of Trump has been, he's against the false song of globalism. That globalization has been bad. A lot of Americans have heard from globalization. Therefore, he's going to reverse the globalization and liberate America from the clutches of a global elite. Sitting in New York and Silicon Valley, in other places, which is not done good by the people of America. So therefore, I think we don't know how far he can take this argument because America is deeply integrated with the world economy. The fact is, his mobilization, his success, mostly in the Midwest, which has tilted the scales, is quite clearly a new thing for a Republican candidate to change the historic positions of the party from pro-globalization to anti-globalization. That's one. The second aspect, I think, is the America. We all think, all of us who apply for visas, of course, we think it's an open country, right? It's a land of immigrants. Everyone just off the boat in that country. But what Mr. Trump is saying, enough is enough. We're going to raise barriers at the borders. He talked about building a wall on the border with Mexico. He's talked about limiting Muslim migration into immigration and visitors into the United States, and that he's going to throw out a large number of illegal immigrants in the United States. And he's promised to do some things quite early on in his tenure. I don't know, actually he can build a wall. The wall is a metaphor for a fence. You could speculate on that, but the fact is that he's promised to limit immigration into the United States. The third thing, I think what he said is, America should stop mucking around the world. That why is the US in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in so many places? The US, the idea that, look, US had the traditional argument from Clinton and the internationalists, America has some kind of a special divine mandate to take care of the world order. A lot of us, of course, don't like it, and of course, but the fact for us, we are not prepared to take the same argument from Mr. Trump, who's saying America must limit its international role, look after its own interests, avoid getting into foreign wars. But somebody troubles you, you're going to beat the thing out of him, right? So that is what he says he promises to do, the various terrorist groups that operate. So I think on three core issues, on globalism, globalization, trade, on open borders, and on America's international role, he's promised to change the direction. So I think this is going to be of importance for us. For example, on trade, how we deal with a trade system globally, how we deal with Indians who are going to go to the US, will the H-1B visas be restricted, and how he deals with the question of terrorism and international security. My view, I'll stop here, that while there are problems on the economic front of how this might play out, on the political security front, the idea that the US must accept a limited role in international system opens space for India to play a larger role in the world. So therefore, I think we need to prepare ourselves to play a larger role, because all these years we've talked about America does too much. When America does too little, are we ready to step in? Are we put our money and our muscle where our mouth is?
Thank you, Dr. Rajamohan. We're privileged also to have to my left Ambassador Arun Singh, who recently completed his tenure as India's ambassador to the United States. He has had a very distinguished diplomatic career. He was India's envoy to France, to Israel, and he's also spent many years as the deputy chief of mission in the Indian embassy in Washington. So somebody who has a long track record of working with the US and who helped guide the India-US relationship through many ups and many downs, I imagine. But turning to you, you were somebody who were at the Republican National Convention when Donald Trump was made the nominee. You have engaged with many of Donald Trump's advisors. What do you think the future holds for US-India bilateral relationship?
Thank you, Dhruva. So, talking of the bilateral relationship and the trajectory under Donald Trump, I just want to put it in the context of what's happened between India and the US in the last 2 years and what we can therefore anticipate as a result now. So if you just look at the last 2 years of the relationship, our Prime Minister has visited the US 4 times. One was a multilateral visit. 2 were multilateral but had a significant bilateral component. And the 4th was a completely full-fledged bilateral visit. During this period, President Obama also visited India. That was in January 2015. Analyzing the visit, what stands out for us is that, one, you can see that now there is broad bipartisan support in the United States for the relationship with India. People argue that this started really with the visit of President Clinton to India in 2000, which followed the difficulties we had in 1998 after we had done our nuclear tests and the challenge related to the Kargil conflict in 1999. But his visit in 2000 started setting the relationship on a different footing. President Bush really transformed the relationship with the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement between the two countries, initiated in 2005 and signed in 2008. President Obama has been the first US president to visit India twice in his tenure, the first US president to visit India on our Republic Day, the first US president to declare support for India's permanent membership of the UN Security Council, and also to declare India as a major defense partner. So you can see how the relationship based on all this is evolving in that direction. Also, when the Prime Minister visited in June this year, he was, of course, invited by President Obama, a Democratic president, but he was also invited to speak to a joint session of the US Congress by the Republican Speaker, Paul Ryan. And for Paul Ryan, he has been, till then, the first head of state or government that he invited to address a joint session under his speakership. So it was a reflection of how he saw the relationship with India, the leadership of the Prime Minister. Now, going beyond the bipartisan support, if we look at the substantive aspects of the cooperation, I think a lot has happened again over the previous period, especially the last 2 years. Again, looking at the trade and economic relationship, our trade has increased 5 times over the last 15 years. US is our largest trading partner in goods and services. For US, of course, the figure in percentage terms relative to the other trade partners is small. But in some areas, the engagement is very deep. One of our strengths lies in the IT sector. And the US, as you know, is the world leader in innovation, especially in digital technology. And when we were preparing for the Prime Minister's visit in September 2015 to the West Coast, we could see that Indian companies, Indian origin tech entrepreneurs, Indian origin tech workers are an integral part of that US leadership in the world in innovation, especially in digital technology. And I'll just describe for you that we had one event focusing on digital technology where the Prime Minister laid out his vision of how he saw developments in India. Before that, we had 5 CEOs of US companies speaking about what they were doing in India, the trends in the world, the opportunities in India. And there were the CEOs of Cisco, Qualcomm, Microsoft, Google, and Adobe. Now I'll mention you their names: John Chambers, Paul Jacobs, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, and Shantanu Narayan. So you can immediately see the integration of the Indian effort with the US effort in this area, which holds potential for the future. In June, when the Prime Minister interacted with a group of US corporate leaders, they indicated that they had plans of additional $45 billion worth of investment in India in the coming 2 years. Indian companies over the last 6 or 7 years have invested more than $15 billion in the US economy, again, a fact that is not widely known. We have a presence in more than 40 states and have created 100,000 jobs directly. And of course, there is indirect job creation impact that takes place. If we move from there to defense cooperation, US has not been a traditional defense partner for us. But again, if you noted, the Prime Minister speaking to the US Congress spoke about our overcoming the hesitations of history. In the last 5 or 6 years, we have now contracted to buy about $14 billion of defense supplies from the US. And some of those supplies have been critical to our defense effort, including C-17 aircraft, C-130 aircraft, and other supplies. We have moved away from a buyer-seller relationship to a partnership in technology. We now have a defense trade and technology initiative where we are looking at joint development of technologies. And among the areas we're looking at is aircraft carrier technology, jet engine technology. If we are able to make progress in this area, again, it will deepen significantly the relationship. This year, we've already had 2 exchange of visits at the level of defense ministers, and you'd have seen reports suggesting that there's likely to be another visit in the coming month. But I think one important dimension that gives really strength to the relationship is the people-to-people dimension. We have 3.5 million Indian Americans today in the United States. There are about 110,000 Indian origin doctors in that country. 1 out of 7 patients is seen by an Indian doctor. 40% of all hotel rooms in the United States are owned and managed by Indian Americans, generating $13 billion of revenue and contributing hugely to social security, to taxes, and of course, economic impact. During the Obama administration, suddenly we saw a large number of Indian Americans coming into administration and at very high levels, something that had not happened before. And in this election, you will see, till now, so far, throughout history, there have been only 3 Indian Americans elected to Congress. In this election, now we have all of a sudden 5 being present in the US Congress at the same time. So you can already see the growing presence and impact of this community. And a lot of analysts have pointed out that historically, US foreign policy has been impacted by the growing size and influence of the diaspora communities that have come to the United States. So that again will give us some impact going ahead. And also we find now growing convergence in our assessments and interests if we look around the world related to terrorism, to the broader Asia-Pacific region, and that will provide a basis. Now moving from there to what we would probably see under a Trump administration. As many of you know, he had said he's a fan of India. He said India and the US would be best friends. There have been reference to his business interests in India. We would expect that the relationship with Russia will probably improve. And that's what he has articulated during his campaign. That is something we would certainly welcome from India's point of view. We would expect that there should be a focus on the issue of terrorism, and because it has impacted on the US, there have been attacks in the US, and that is again something that we would welcome. On trade, as Rajamohan mentioned, perhaps there would be some slowdown of the globalization drive. From our perspective, again, that is something that we should be comfortable with, because clearly we need to go ahead and pursue our reforms further so that we would be in a position to meaningfully engage with the globalization effort some years down the line and use it to India's benefit. But despite all this, there would be some areas that we would need to watch carefully. One would be on the H-1B visas, again, something that Rajamohan referred to as the anti-immigration sentiment. Here we make the argument, and I gave to you some reference to that the Indian high-tech and H-1B worker has actually been contributing to profitability and technology generation by US companies. Today, unemployment in the US is at 5%. The US Federal Reserve has said that this is maximum employment for the US. Unemployment in the high-tech sector, therefore, is even less. So we need to continue making that argument that the Indian H-1B workers is not impacting jobs in the US, is not taking away jobs from US workers, and that is something that we have to continue in the effort. We have to see what will happen in Afghanistan, how a Trump administration defines its policy and presence in Afghanistan. That will also affect its relationship with Pakistan. It will certainly impact on security and stability in the region. That is something that needs to be watched. Similarly, we'll need to see how US defines its policy related to China, because at one level he has spoken about jobs being taken away, about what China has been doing in the manufacturing sector, but he has also said that he's a person who can do deals. He will look at the economic opportunity. And the entire effort in the US and West so far has been to engage with and integrate China into the international system. And they believe that works for them. But the question will be, as China becomes strong, as China engages with the international system, will it change the rules of the international order? And as China tries to change the rules of the international order, how will US respond to that? And that will have implication for us, so something that we would need to watch. So in conclusion, I would say that I would expect that the trajectory of the relationship, which has been built over the past years, will be sustained in the Trump administration, and there are enough indications of that. But for the first 6 months, for the first year or so, we will have to do a lot of nimble footwork, because the administration will take 6 months to settle down. There'll be a lot of new people coming in, and actual policy choices will emerge from the challenges that are there, from the briefings that take place, and the domestic and international compulsions that play out for the US. And so we'll have to work with that on that basis.
Thank you, Ambassador. To my far right, we have Rajiv Malhotra. He is somebody you may know by his Twitter handle, Rajiv Message. He's the head of the Infinity Foundation. He's the author of 5 books, including Academic Hinduphobia and Breaking India. But I want to ask Mr. Malhotra, as somebody who is based in the United States, in New Jersey, who has followed US-India relations, who's very engaged with the Indian-American community there, what do you think Trump's election means for India and for Indian Americans?
Thank you. I have lived in the United States through 9 presidencies, Lyndon Johnson and Nixon onwards, and Trump will be the 10th presidency. And this is not just passively living. I was in the IT industry myself, they talked about it, until 20 years ago when I retired, but also very engaged in the politics, very publicly, very vocally, speaking, both to the Indian community, to the Indian embassy people, often disagreeing with them, speaking out on China and Pakistan policies, criticizing and supporting the US policies on various matters, writing on this. So my perspective is not through textbooks or a short stint, but having lived there for a very long time. And I want to tell you this, that nothing like the Trump phenomenon has happened in these years that I've lived there. It's neither a left-wing phenomenon nor a right-wing phenomenon. It's a phenomenon of rejection of establishment both ways. And this is it's like resetting, and Americans have to create a new myth. The myth of American exceptionalism, that we are the greatest and so on, has had a left-wing spin and a conservative spin. Both are now to be reinvented. A new myth has to be invented, which probably will happen after a period of time. The disruption of the left is extremely devastating because it undermines the credibility of media. I mean, it's like almost abusive, insulting, downgrading, really knocking down the media, and he won. Okay, so when somebody is that much in the face, politically incorrect, and wins, it tells you something about what's happening deep in the bowels of the country, in the grassroots of the country. I don't think the American liberal mainstream media understands or understood the sentiments of the population adequately, and the Indian media, being a spin on the American media, being sort of almost driven by them in many cases, did not understand that either. So it's important to understand why this happened, and that'll tell you where America might be headed and what might be the implications for India. When I first went there, around 1970, the white Christian male had job security. There was a lifetime employment with the union. You were guaranteed that you'll have a house you'll own and a car, and the all-American lifestyle was there. Gradually, this has been eroded. This has been eroded by globalization, as the ambassador mentioned, jobs being taken by Mexico and China mostly, some by India, but numerically lot more by those countries, and the influx of immigration. So when this happens, we are welcome. There is this age of postmodernism and open borders and all that. Americans celebrated it for 20-some years at first. But when it began to cost them their jobs, things change. It's one thing to say, I like all the diversity, I enjoy, I can eat sushi here, and I can eat dosa there, and I can watch a Bharatnatyam here and whatnot, and this is how we're great, welcoming all of that. But it changes when I lose my job because of that, or that's the perception. So this xenophobia almost, Islamophobia, xenophobia, phobia of non-Christians, is a product of something real that has happened. And so I don't think he's anti-globalization. As he says it, he wants America first. So if there can be a renegotiated globalization, which puts America first in a new kind of globalization, Trump is likely to go for that. And Trump is likely to temporarily make it sound like he's anti-globalization, shock all these trading partners into better deals. And these could be more oil from Mexico for cheaper price in exchange for all the jobs that have gone to Mexico. Could be some concessions from China. So this is a deal maker in him who sort of hits you and wants a better deal. Is a style of negotiation. I don't think he's foolish enough to want to close the borders forever and not trade, because he himself is so invested in foreign countries. Many and most of his own properties are there. So this is just a ploy. I don't think Trump has fully worked out exactly what he'll do. You need to look at the composition of his cabinet to get some ideas. A lot of very extreme Christian right wing are in the cabinet, starting with, of course, the vice president himself. So this is the state of what has happened to the liberal, the demise of the neoliberalism era. And Indian leftists should ask, why did postmodernism crash? It crashed not only in US, but Brexit. Look at the trends, political trends in France, the rise of Putin, and Narendra Modi. So why is it a worldwide phenomenon that this thing about, things will get more liberal and, left wing and postmodernism, it seems like the pendulum is swinging the other side. And rather than blaming one person or another, I think that we should look at the deeper phenomenon affecting human beings. Why are human beings rejecting this? While people are getting more educated, more technology, getting more interconnected, more content flowing across borders, more trade, all of that is globalization of information. At the same time, when it comes to identity, people are going back to their roots. And this is very important to understand, that going back to the roots pendulum in the United States is a very real phenomenon. So I think immigrants, when I went there, we as immigrants were welcome, but on their terms. It was not like our terms. And my generation of immigrants had to work very, very hard. I was in my 20s when I went there. We had to work, I was 20-ish, actually. So we had to work extremely hard to get on par and then actually get ahead. So now there is a renegotiation of who is the American and how do others fit in. I don't think it's a question of kicking out people and so on. That's just rhetoric. But it will be a renegotiation of American values. As far as the conservative movement is concerned, an equal shock has been delivered to the conservative movement. There was the conservatism defined by William Buckley and Ronald Reagan, and that was the mainstay of the Republican Party for several presidencies. That has come crashing because he rejected that whole thing. William Buckley's conservatism had three parts. There is religious conservatism, which is Bible, the creationism and anti-abortion and those kind of policies. Then there is economic conservatism, which is free trade. And then there is ethnic, racial kind of conservatism, white. Okay? So these three comprise conservatism. And these three are going to be renegotiated, taken apart, put back together in some other configuration. So, and also I feel that this rejection of the traditional orthodox old school leftist values and the orthodox old school conservative values is actually, another way to look at it is the return to hard power as opposed to soft power. Hard power is make America economically strong again, make America militarily powerful, and make America politically dominant. So a combination of economics, military, and politics is hard power. And soft power is about culture and things of that sort. And he's not bothered about what will be our reputation, what will somebody think, and so on. So the soft power has taken a backseat in what drives the new American exceptionalism myth. Now, the issues regarding India, how will India be affected? You see, this Christian versus Islam is a very serious issue that Trump has tapped into. I was watching the ratings, the polls. Every time there would be an Islamic terror attack, it would be boom up for Trump. And people were saying that, if in the 11th hour there is a big event of that sort, he will win hands down. Luckily, there's no such event, but he kind of won anyway. So there is a correlation between the fear factor. To a large extent, it is ISIS that have put Trump in power, to a large extent. Because had these things not happened, he would not have been able to arouse all the fear in people. This arousing Christians against Islam has worked, okay, and it has worked in history many times, this kind of stuff. The question is, what is the implication of that in India? The Indian Christian evangelical gets a lot of their funding and directions from the Western evangelists. And these American evangelists are the ones who are the most ardent supporters of Trump. So while we are talking about all the good things that Trump may do for us, he may also be under pressure from the Christian right to turn on the faucet and accelerate, because they'll want their pound of flesh. They've supported him, and they'll want their agenda. And so one of the things that flourished during Reagan and the first Bush presidency was this rise of huge amount of Christian evangelism as a part of American foreign policy. So if this Christian evangelism accelerates, it creates an issue for the Modi government. Also, if this Christian evangelism goes after Islam in a very hard manner, what does it do to the leftist coalition in India? Because the Indian left is a coalition of leftists, Christians, Muslims, anybody who's against the majority religion. It's almost like, let's have a common enemy which binds us. But what happens to a coalition if two of the partners are fighting? What happens to a coalition if the parent nexus of Islam and the parent nexus of Christianity are in a war? What does it do to the Indian subsidiaries? This is a question somebody has to ask. We have to think about it. Will the leftist coalition survive? Or will the leftist coalition itself rupture in India because the parents of these two partners are at war? Literally, physically also at war. This is a very important thing. And as far as the Indian Hindu groups are concerned, they should, while a lot of the Hindu Americans are rejoicing that, he's anti-Islam and the enemy's enemies are friend, I think that's naive. Because while he may be anti-Islam, and that may give us some benefits in negotiating something vis-a-vis Pakistan, the point is his support base are very pro-Christian. And so while you get your two opponents fighting each other, and you could think it's good news because you'll use one against the other, but that's kind of naive, and it may backfire. It may backfire. So the Indian side needs to negotiate very carefully. Indian side needs to put on the table some of our demands and what we can do for them. And this, through the Christian bandwagon of human rights and whatever, it has to be put on the table as an important issue, and not turning India into a territory of Christian versus Muslim, because if they're trying to flare up wars between these two religions, we don't want to be the place where this happens, because it'll be our problem. It'll be easy for them to export it and say, okay, go fight in India, don't fight in the United States, but we don't want that here in India. So these are some of the things that I wanted to point out. Also, the demise of media credibility. The left-wing liberal media has lost credibility with people. Is also, one has to ask, what's the echo effect in India? Is there going to be a similar demand by the Indian public that the media is very biased, gives you one-sided views? I mean, whether it's newspapers or whether it's literary festivals, you see a over-representation of certain ideological views and under-representation of the opposing views. In the name of objectivity and free speech and all that, the point is there are some chowkidars who control the gates. And so appointing a lot of chowkidars to control the gates can also almost turn the media into a media mafia. So we have to ask what happens to the Indian media mafia, in a sense. But the term media mafia is now becoming very politically correct to talk in the United States. And will it also happen in India that there'll be a consumer revolt against this kind of establishment that has had a stranglehold over the public discourse in the name of progress and postmodernism and flat world and all that? So I think Trump encourages this sort of revolt, this sort of resistance, and this sort of, knocking down the establishment. Yeah? The final point I want to make is Trump opens opportunities for India to get some alliance together in dealing with Pakistan. It is possible. It'll be a very delicate matter. But my concern is that Pakistan's diplomacy has traditionally outwitted the Indian diplomacy. I don't want to hit out at any Indian diplomat. They're wonderful people. But I've lived there through 9 presidencies. I have yet to see a presidential term except recently when ISIS made it so difficult, so almost impossible to be friends with Pakistan. But I have hardly ever before that seen a term where Indian diplomats outscored and outwit Pakistanis in terms of negotiating good deals. How they do it, why are they smarter, that's a good question. Similarly with China. I mean, China had really been able to take the US for a ride in terms of how much intellectual property they would steal, how they would get away with all sorts of things. Radical theft of American capital, taking the capital, doing all sorts of things and taking jobs is radical. But we've not been able to do more than just talk. So, a very good way to understand a very good way to dramatize the difference between Indian diplomacy and Chinese diplomacy was when Manmohan Singh was the first foreign head of government, felicited in the Obama administration. There was a huge pageantry, like you've never seen in Washington, D.C. Lot of symbolism, lot of people wearing Indian clothes, lot of, fanfare, good talk about India, India's greatness, India's culture, all the things that make Indians very proud, emotionally very, very proud. But no agreement of substance, nothing concrete. आप हमारे घर आएं, आपकी बहुत इज्जत करेंगे, तालियां बजाएंगे, आपको हार डालेंगे, but nothing. Few weeks later, the head of Chinese government comes. There is no such fanfare. There is no such big, this is the greatest friendship and so many hundred people come and media opportunities, none of that. But very, very important concrete deals signed. So, they've gone after hard power. Chinese have gone after hard power deal making. And they are not into the Chinese equivalent of dance and bhangra and music and that. They're not into that. They're into, let's make money, let's become a strong military, let's do that first, and then all those other things we can follow. Indians have focused far too much on pop culture, postmodernism, these kind of measures, false measures of success. And I think the Indian diplomacy needs to rethink what it would take to sort of reset our negotiating approaches. So we walk away from a deal with solid hard power. Now I will give credit, they did this nuclear deal, they've done this defense deal. Some good things have happened during the tenure of our ambassador, recent ambassador, and that's fantastic, and he gets credit. I'm talking about the general trend for half a century. Yeah? And I'm hoping that this recent success is the one that continues, and it was not just a blip. Because I've been there, I've seen these things happen for half a century, and I'm worried that the Pakistanis could outwit us again. I'm told today there's an announcement that they've cut a deal with Russia to use their land. See, Pakistan's land is for rent. They rent out something to China, they rent out something to this fellow, that fellow. Now they realize Russia needs warm water access. Maybe they can rent their territory to give them warm water access. They're quickly doing this because Trump is close to Russia, and that may be a way to soften Trump. Okay, so India needs to outwit Pakistan in the domain of hard power deal making, and not be content with the next cultural festival and these kind of things. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. We actually have two people here who know a lot about both Russia. Dr. Rajamohan actually was just in Russia recently, and Ambassador Singh actually dealt with Pakistan for many years as well, so could definitely speak about that if there is interest in that subject. It occurred to me while you were speaking, sir, that Sam Huntington would have, if he was alive today, would have a thing or two to say about some of the larger cultural issues that you brought up. Before we get into the Q&A, and we have about 25 minutes or so left, and I do want to get in as many views as possible, we do have a lot of people crowded over there, so if we can give 2 minutes, if any of you want to actually sit. Unfortunately, we only have space on the floor here. If a few of you want to come over now would be a good time to do it before we get into the Q&A involving the rest of you in the audience.
Very good afternoon to the panel. My question is specially directed to Ambassador Singh and generally to anyone who may answer the question. So you spoke about how probably Trump's interest in getting closer to Putin might actually be preferable for India. But what my understanding of the situation was that the fact that there was a slight antagonism between Trump and Putin actually benefited India, at least in terms of defense deals?
You mean between the US and
Between
US
US
and
and
Russia?
Russia, sorry, benefited India. So could you elaborate as to how a greater understanding and friendship between the two of them could benefit India? Thank you.
If you could pass the mic, I think there was a question here in this row. Yes. I have a very small question. No. I do not permit. Several people have raised their hand before you, so I'll come to you later.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sandeep Sehgal. I'm a chartered accountant. See, my question is, recently we have seen that there are so many American Indians in US who have shunned the identity, like people like Nikki Haley and Bobby Jindal, etc. And those American Indians who have asserted their identity, like Tulsi Gabbard, she has been attacked few months ago for her identity. It's sort of like Bible versus Gita and Krishna versus Jesus, etc.
You're talking about Nikki Haley specifically being attacked for her identity?
No.
Tulsi Gabbard, I'm sorry.
Tulsi Gabbard was attacked. So why is that so in America? Because it's like saying, okay, you can assert your identity, but to a certain extent, and if you do it, you are not allowed to occupy certain positions. Why is that?
Could you pass it down to this gentleman over here? Yeah.
Hello, hi, I'm Satyam, assistant professor, and good afternoon to you. My question is that basically what I saw first in Delhi after the election of Kejriwal, that he got 68 out of 70 seats. Then Modi came in power and was like a very direct answer by the public that we want someone in power who can do things. And then I saw something on the same lines with Brexit, and now I can see Trump, and the media was against it, but the Trump came in power. So are we seeing some kind of motive or meme or motive for upcoming leaders? So for the upcoming leaders in the time, that these are the kind of leaders are we going to see, since I'm only 30 and I'm going to see these kind of leaders.
Who would you want that question directed to?
To Sir Malhotra, sir.
Okay, all right. And to the lady up in front of you. No, right in front. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Deepa Chadda and I'm an HR professional. My question is to you, sir. How do you see the role of media in this whole thing? Are they plain being dishonest or they're not getting it?
So when we start with you, it's a specific question about US-Russia relations. We'll take another round of questions. We'll have time for that.
I'll respond just to the question on US-Russia relations. So as you know, US is a very complex organism in terms of decision making. And the president, of course, has a certain amount of latitude in terms of foreign policy, but not full latitude. In terms of domestic policy, he's even more constrained. The US Congress has a lot of powers, the regions have a lot of powers. There are, despite all the positive trends in the US-India relationship, there are also a lot of naysayers in the relationship who argue that US is doing far more for India than India is doing for the US. What is India doing? Where is India standing with us? You saw it in the context, for example, on the US relationship with Iran. As the US-Iran relationship got more and more tense, there was increasing gaze on what the India-Iran relationship was. And that was being challenged in the Congress and elsewhere. Even in the context of the discussions on the civil nuclear deal, there were references to the India-Iran relationship. So we welcomed when the US was able to do the JCPOA with Iran, because that eased Iran's relationship with the West. It enabled us to move ahead with some important aspects of cooperation with Iran, for example, the Chabahar project, which is a very important project. Similarly, under the last phase of the Obama administration, as the US relationship Russia was getting very, very tense with developments in Europe and elsewhere, if it continued down that trend, and as we are building more and more with the United States, there would be people in the United States, analysts, people in Congress, who would be asking that if we are doing this for India, what is India doing for us? And we don't want to be in a position where we have to look at doing an either-or choice between US and Russia, or look at certain aspects of our cooperation, because our cooperation with Russia is critical for us. Russia has been a very important defense partner. Russia has been a critical political support for us at times when we need it. Therefore, if the US relationship with Russia is not that tense, then we don't have to constrain our choices in building the relationship with either of them.
On the Russia question, I just want to add something. And I think if you go back to the Cold War period, I think when US and Russia had an enduring permanent conflict, India's space got restricted. Today, I think last 20 years, because of US-Russian rapprochement, then it's been a lot easier for India to engage the world and to benefit from all sides. Today, I think what's happened in the last few years is the renewed tension between Americans and the Russians, and as a result of which we've seen the Russians move closer to the Chinese. This in turn, I think, creates problems for India in the Asian sphere, that a US-Russia relaxation of tensions would lead to a more independent Russian role in the region and will make it easier to construct a balance of power in Asia. But the current policies, if they keep pushing Russia into the arms of the Chinese, then it's going to be even harder to construct anything stable in the region. So I think Trump, it's quite surprising how definitive, how assertive he has been, asking public, what's wrong with having good relationship with Russia? Why can't we cut a deal with the Russians against the ISIS in the Middle East? Why don't we work together in different parts of the world? So this is quite unusual. Normally when you say, look, like in India, if you say, look, are you pro-Pakistan, then everybody's supposed to go under the table. For someone to stand up and say, look, I'm willing, this is in America's interest to engage the Russians, I think marks a very interesting turn in the way the American public debate on foreign policy is concerned. Second, I think on the Indian Americans or American Indians, I don't know what you call them, but let's not forget, Indian Americans, Chinese Americans, Bulgarian Americans, Russian Americans, you can name it, any number of they're Americans. Let's not forget that. These are Americans, even if they've just become a naturalized citizen yesterday, they're Americans. America has the capacity to integrate and create, a salad bowl, whatever you want, melting pot, whatever you want to call it. They're all American. They represent the United States' interests. So for us to get too deeply drawn into their internal thing would be a mistake. That finally, there is a state-to-state relationship. We engage where it suits us. We don't engage, we stand up when it doesn't suit us. So therefore, what happens internally is interesting, it's important to understand the direction of the United States, but in the end, the ethnic orientation, the religious orientation, a lot of people said Barack Obama was a Muslim, therefore, because he kept denying he was a Muslim. And we've seen that campaign go against him. So we should be clear, America is the powerful state with multiple ethnic and religious identities. For India, the challenge is, how do I deal with this gigantic power? I think our diplomacy has done very well, notwithstanding what Mr. Malhotra was saying, that from being where we were in 1991, when Americans were saying, we're going to mediate on Kashmir, we want you to improve your human rights, we want you to do X, Y, Z, to one where the US has become an important partner for India. That's a huge transformation. You might not fully appreciate it, but I think even in the last 8 years, remember after 98, Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, nuclear tests, immediately sanctions were imposed on India. And within a few years, we reversed those sanctions. There was a time when America was the best friend of Pakistan. Today it's not. Today China is the best friend of Pakistan. So I think we must believe in our own capability as a country, as a collective, to negotiate with the international system and benefit from it, and not get frightened by different trends that emerge in each of these countries, because these are, as Ambassador said, it's a complex organism. So we got to deal with the US as it is. And if there's some things, like if they put pressure on some human rights issue, India must stand up. Similarly, like on economic issues, on the question of Kashmir, we've stood up in the last 20 years. So we're not afraid today. I think India's third largest economy on PPP terms, so 6th or 7th, depending on the exchange rate, where we are, $2.2 trillion GDP, third largest military, 5th largest spender on defense. So it's about time we saw ourselves as a strong state that can negotiate a way through a complex world. Those of us who are slightly older, a lot of younger people, there was in the 60s, India was importing food. Everyone was putting all kinds of pressures on India. We've seen all that. So today I think we should be more confident. We have every reason to be more confident in engaging the world, including the United States. And I'm quite confident that today we are in a much better position than we've ever been historically in the last many years. Lastly, on media, the direct question. Look, I think media as a collective has had a bias. I think what has come through so clearly in this, media has a bias of its own. They're elite groups. And I think the mistake or the terrible thing was they've been very unhelpful to Clinton in the end, because they couldn't see what was under their nose. They couldn't go and cover the Midwestern regions. It was Mr. Nixon, I think you lived under Mr. Nixon. Mr. Nixon who said, the Midwest is a bigger problem than the Middle East. So if you saw 100,000 votes from Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan are the ones ultimately tilted the balance against. So 100,000 votes in these 4 states. Therefore, the reasons, there were multiple reasons for that, but the media, even in the last day, if you go back to the polls, they were still given the kind of lead. So it's not just the media, it's the pollsters, the consultants, a whole lot of people who said, she's winning. It's a blue column. You had the blue column. These 4 states were supposed to be in the blue column. So I think there is a collective refusal to see what is going on. And I think it happens occasionally, and I think they still haven't seen it. The politically correct classes, I mean, today a lot of the reaction, which Mr. Malhotra rightly pointed out, there is a reaction against defining political correctness. You can't celebrate Christmas in schools. You can't do X. You had to do this, and bathrooms was a big issue. Gender-free bathrooms was a big issue, which is Hillary Clinton was supporting some of those. So people are fed up with the kind of agenda. So therefore, I think media has been promoting this, but as a collective elite, I think what they've done has been problematic for themselves. Today, the faith in that system has declined, the media system. Interestingly, one guy who got it right, there's a man called Sanjeev Rai, who did this algorithm which predicted Trump would win by using Facebook, Twitter interactions. He said the methodology of doing 1,100 phone calls on a landline and judging on that basis of the mood of the people, we passed that. So I think there are new ways. I think people are going to learn from this of how do you judge public opinion. And the Americans who preach, say, media freedom to everyone else, I think it's a time, look in the mirror, see what you can learn.
Ms. Malhotra, there were 2 questions that were specifically addressed to you, so if you could answer
Yes,
those.
I want to talk about those specific questions. The hyphenated identity of Americans is a very important and powerful thing. You cannot, yes, there is one America, they're all Americans, but there is the Irish American parade. There is the Italian American parade in New York. There is a Hispanic American, there is the Black American, all that. There's Chinese American parade, they bring their dragon and all that. There is the Indian American parade on August 15, and then the day after, usually it's the Pakistan American parade. So there's about 25, 30 of these parades to symbolize the importance of the hyphenated identity. So it's not just symbolism and pop culture, but it's very deeply rooted in the political structure. It's very deeply, people are demanding and getting courses on Mandarin in all the public schools. People are getting courses in, Spanish, of course, is everywhere. Now people are lobbying and getting courses in Hindi and even Sanskrit in the public schools and Bengali. So America is a very solid land of hyphenated identities. It's a land of immigrants. Each immigrant group comes and negotiates its place in the hyphenation. How American and how X they are. Are they more X than American? Are they less X than American? The Irish, there's a book called How the Irish Became White. Until the certain time in the 1800s, Irish were not classified as white people, and in the United States, and in the all-white unions, trade unions, Irish were banned. It was said, dogs and Irish not allowed. Irish were banned. And the reason is that Ireland was a colony of England. So when the Irish migrated to the United States, the Englishman did not think that this Irishman is my equal. Back home, he sits below me. How come this guy who was my servant and colonized by me, and now that he's across the Atlantic, is my equal? So there was this thing against Irish being equal. So then there was a war, there was actual violence, some people were killed in Philadelphia, and then they had a treaty that said, okay, from now on, we'll classify Irish as white people. And that's how Irish became white. So there is a story like this of how the Jews became white. There is a book called How the Jews Became White Folks. That's just 2 generations ago. So the East Europeans were not classified as white. So all these immigrant groups have to negotiate with 2 things. Their status relative to whiteness and their status relative to Christianity. These are the 2 things you have to negotiate that determine who you are. So the Chinese workers who were brought in as indentured laborers, they faced huge discrimination, and they decided that all become Christians and it would solve the bias problem. It did not. Many Chinese American from that era are Christians. They've been Christians for several generations. But the discrimination didn't stop. So this hyphenated identity is a very fascinating and complex topic. I have been studying this and writing books on this. The hyphenated identity, what it means is the whole history of America is a history of immigrants and how they hyphenate and how they then try to renegotiate that hyphen, what that hyphen means. So for Indians, I laugh when some Romila Thapar type person who doesn't know one darn thing about American culture, one darn thing, makes some snide comment on NRIs are doing this and shouldn't, or whatever the snide comment is. She doesn't know what is going on in the United States with respect to all the hyphenated. What the Indians are doing is part and parcel of becoming American. You become American by hyphenating with the American identity. Then you negotiate your place. You lobby for your ethnicity. You lobby for your political positions in Congress and so on, and mayors. I'm part of that activity to get a lot of mayors and local assemblymen, of your kind. You negotiate your religion with the mainstream. So all this is negotiated. This is how you become American. So it's not that because we're all Americans, we don't worry about these things. Because we're all Americans, we do worry about these things. And this is how you become American. You become American by negotiating the hyphen. So this is an important point to understand. And this business of this Bobby Jindal and Nikki Haley have to Christianize in order to be accepted in a certain party is an important topic. We should talk about it. It means that other hyphens, other aspects of the hyphen have been properly, transcended. The ethnic part of it, the economic Indians, so many doctors, all that, Indians have transcended. When it comes to religion, when it comes to non-biblical religions, it's not just the Muslims. It's all non-biblical religions who have to keep asserting their identity, their religious identity. No one's going to stop you from having a Hindu temple. I've been involved in some litigation on behalf of Hindu temples to get them their rights. The rights are very strong, and you can get your rights and become a temple. And a lot of flourishing temples exist. So in the public sphere, you can practice any religion you want. In your home, you can practice any religion you want. When it comes to proper representation in textbooks, you have to fight. The Muslims have a Council on Islamic Education, CIE, and they lobby with McGraw-Hill, with all these people. I've talked to them to see how they do it. They lobby, they have huge funding from Saudi Arabia to make sure that their representation in the textbooks is okay. So you will not see a school textbook in these states where the Islam section is burqa and all those, women are being abused. You will not see that. But you will see derogatory remarks regarding Hindus, because we are still starting this process of negotiating how the school textbooks will represent us. So these issues of representation, identity, the role of religion is dynamic. It's an ongoing process. Nobody has stopped us from fighting. We have to fight. Americans are a very fair people, but you have to fight for yourself. They will not give it to you on a platter. You have to go fight for your rights, okay? And if you're willing to fight for your rights, they'll hear you out, and they're pretty fair. So we are doing that. The Indian American community, the American Indians are unfortunately got ethnically cleansed. They were the Native Americans. I prefer calling them Native Americans because they're the real natives of that country. The Indian Americans have this sort of an issue. The second question was on media.
So if you could keep your answer brief, because we'll
Sure.
have time for another round of
Sure.
questions.
The second question was media, real quick. I think the demise of mainstream media is happening, thankfully, with social media. I think it's very important that this is happening because that's the true voice of the people, and there is no elite group that is... Unfortunately, the old mainstream media type people, they still control literary festivals.
I mean, I just want to add one thing here. I mean, while social media is in some ways the democratization of information, it is also important to keep in mind that it has contributed in various ways to polarization, to misinformation, to public dissatisfaction, and to echo chambers as well. And I think we just need
But
to
I
keep
would
that
say
in
that the
mind.
mainstream media contributed to polarization and misinformation
Also-
much bigger. Because you cannot say that just because they're wearing proper clothes and being in a high-rise building and some billionaires own that, therefore they're free from bias. They're full of bias. It's just that in the mainstream media, you don't have built-in checks and balances, whereas in social media, yes, you have irresponsible people spreading misinformation, but there are other people who are also correcting them. So there is more self-correction.
May I,
we have,
excuse me, may I ask?
Sir, no, please. I said I would call on you and I was going to, but unfortunately I think we may not have time. We had two gentlemen, yes. We had two gentlemen here who were waiting very patiently. We'll go turn to them. So you, if somebody could please get him a microphone as well, that would be. Yeah, please, yeah, just speak. Huh?
Fake picture in front of people and we won the election like Trump. First thing. And second thing...
I'm sorry, who are you talking about? Trump?
Pardon?
You're talking about Trump specifically or somebody else?
Yes, Trump specifically. Yeah. And like you can see the Poland election or something, and also Indian election. So some so-called nationalist patriot leader is giving dubious fake picture in front of people and win the election like Trump. Second thing is globalization partially died after recession. Is globalization is dying completely after Trump election, Trump victory?
Okay. Next to you, not your...
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. I'm Pranav Kishore Saxena. Sir, this is my question for Mr. C. Rajamohan. So you mentioned that after Trump being elected as a president of the United States of America, they want to limit their foreign role. So sir, can we expect the United States of America to now follow the UN mandate completely?
So I think Dr. Rajamohan can give a one-word answer to that, but unfortunately we don't have time for other questions. I've been told by the organizers that we have to round this up because we have another session taking place, so I'm afraid I can't do that. So if you could answer in 10 words or less.
Yeah, I think the UN is largely irrelevant to this. When big boys want to do things, they're going to do what they want. UN is a largely irrelevant organization when it comes to security. What is changing is how Trump has redefined America's interest. That is it worth spending $2 trillion in Iraq? So he's saying that, look, you actually created space for ISIS by going into Iraq. So he's saying we don't have to be everywhere. If someone threatens us, we take them on, but it doesn't mean US has to go around building other countries as the previous two administrations have talked about. But I just want to end with one thought. Those who have a hyphen in their name, those who hold American passports and are different communities, it is their problem with the American state. That is not my problem. That's not the Indian problem. That we must understand how the Indian community, the diaspora is working in other places. But in the end, it is India without the hyphen. That's India as a state, India as a people. You try and take advantage of the Indian Americans, but they're not, 1% of America is not going to determine what America is going to do. So we have to,
please don't interrupt.
We have to deal with the state because finally the policies, if tomorrow there's a tariffs on India, tomorrow H-1B visas are curtailed, but the state is going to do it. So we have to see very clearly, Indian American community is an important part of America, interesting part, significant part increasingly as the ambassador said, but in the end, Delhi has to negotiate with Washington.
Thank you. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions. We could have gone on, I think, for another hour. We had a lot of interest. Thank you all for attending. Please join me in thanking our speakers. And please continue this conversation with them after this. Thank you.